wrote back in 2002 on RFC 3271 about the internet for everyone. And you stated in that you believe that we must have the freedom to speak and the freedom to hear. So that's I'm quoting from the RFC 3271. Do you still feel that way as well right now, especially when some countries like China is actively discussing splitting the internet and putting a hard border around sections of the internet, and also creating their own IP-like and protocol, and putting their own shut-up mechanism that to isolate the network or isolate specific hosts if that is actually counteract their internal policies or something like that. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I much prefer an open internet, one in which people are free not only to find information, but to share information and to build applications and to explore things without much constraint. However, having observed the kinds of abuses that are showing up in the internet today, I think we cannot speak of a totally unregulated environment or an unmanaged environment. I think that there have to be penalties for people who harm others in the online environment. I don't much like the idea of drawing national boundaries around pieces of the internet, although politically speaking, it may be impossible to avoid that because a country often has the authority to control all of the assets that are within its borders that are part of the internet. So, for example, shutting down the internet happens in various and sundry countries. In the Cameroon, for example, shut the internet down during elections because they were worried about it. Abusive disinformation, among other things. That's using a giant sledgehammer, to kill a fly. It's not. I would not argue that shutting the internet down is the right way to deal with this problem. But there is a problem of misinformation and disinformation, the abuse of social media and the like, and we do have to figure out how to cope with that. And we have to figure out how to cope with it on an international basis because the perpetrators may be in one jurisdiction and the victims in another. And that could easily cross national boundaries, which leads us to the need for cooperation across those international boundaries, across jurisdictional boundaries, in order to maintain some kind of order. Now, the extreme case of that is what you see and hear from China, which built this Chinese firewall and is offering hardware from Huawei and ZTE to implement a variety of constraints on the users of the internet, whether that's filtering or censorship or tracking and observation. Those are things that those of us in the West are not very happy about and don't believe are necessary. But the other side of that coin is that law enforcement has to be able to exercise its authority in order to protect people, in addition to people learning how to protect themselves by adopting good practices and using two-factor authentication and other kinds of tools, being attentive to phishing attacks and so on. We have to provide those people with tools. So it's going to be a really interesting decade, this next 21st century decade, to try to find the right balance to protect people from harm while at the same time preserving what we all would agree are their human rights to access to information and to express themselves.